This is the one time in my career that probably I'll be able to say whatever I want. So
Mm.
therefore, guess what? I'm going to say whatever I want.
But we should probably explain what is on the table in front of us.
Yes.
There is a book, an award, and the author who wrote said book is sitting right over there. So maybe we should run down. Let's talk about the book.
Okay.
And how was it inspired and blah, blah, blah. So,
Yep. I would say this book began as me trying to make sense of 2020. So it's being written live. It's not a looking back thing where I go, I want to explore a story in that period. It was writing live in the moment. So every day as I'm writing, I'm looking at the news. Then I'm experiencing things like my first time lockdown, first time putting on a mask, first time social distancing, all that. And then gradually just it evolving into an epic global story, and just and then deciding, hey, this might be the one I want to do as a debut as a director further down the line.
Right,
So,
yes.
and that I had that understanding as I was maybe quarter way through the novel. Started to think that, but I tried not to let that. First of all, we had to get the novel down, publish that. And it took on a life of its own. I think because I was so inspired by what everyone was experiencing.
Yeah.
But it pretty much evolved into where the 2020 was the background. So 2020 as in the lockdowns, COVID, all that. And then it evolved into much, much bigger themes.
So sort of a product of circumstance, you could say.
Definitely.
Because, the world changed. So the amount of stories that come out of that and the disappointment in the general public of society, they can't deal with change.
Right.
Fighting over toilet paper and buying all this crazy stuff like all the meat, all the bread. You don't need all the meat. You don't need all the bread. And you definitely don't need a fight. I got pushed over in the supermarket one day.
Wow.
Because they were fighting over toilet paper. And I was just like, man, just have it. Like I was just walking past. I was like, are you kidding me? But yeah, people in large groups, what's that? Society.
Yeah.
That's what people in large groups, isn't it? Is that the definition?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They can't cope with change.
No. And this was a difficult one also because there was so many arguments behind the scenes even within families and all that. So it covers, basically my goal was I didn't know what was happening and I still have no answers to this whole era.
That's right.
But I think I was trying to ask questions. So that's my only job. I don't think storytellers should present answers, but if you can ask pertinent questions, and that involved giving a voice to everyone. Sort of if you imagine like a smorgasbord of opinions about this era, which included, polar opposites, whether it's pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-lockdown, all that stuff, and then people in between. So then that started to bring up sort of the way I look at stories is when you strip away characters with stories like this, you've really got what excites me is competing philosophies.
Yeah.
That's what the characters are. And then you're starting to get into some interesting, it's often the gray areas in between. And
true.
Where it's tricky is no one's right or wrong. And so you can't get into judging any character.
No.
You just have to go, this person's real. And how many times do we all say, oh, I hated that sort of person, and then 5 years later you go, actually, maybe they were right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I've had first-hand experience of you, more so with people I've worked with, and I go, I can't stand them. And then you end up being really good mates with them down the track.
Yeah.
It's really, that actually happens a lot, that the initial relationship you have with someone usually evolves into something else. Maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time it does.
Yeah. Well, that's actually my favorite sort of character, the one that you hate or are reacting to at first, but then when they reveal themselves to be a good character, you actually like them more, and it's kind of like that in real life.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
True.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to write the book?
About 6 months. So it was actually out October 23, 2020, and I remember going, okay, so I have to sort of figure out what would happen for the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was worried that other things would happen, but luckily by about October it was pretty much set.
Yeah,
it was a certain way, and I remember not much changed.
Yeah, nice.
So it was 6 months, but it was really intense because a lot of that was during the lockdown here in Sydney, Australia.
Yep.
And we were just bogged down, and it was so. I'm not really I'm pretty much apolitical. Not really into it. Don't believe in the political system. But with this, I've never followed it so much. I've never followed the news as much. It was
Well, the world changed, and no one had ever gone through this, and it wasn't like a certain country either. It was the entire world. Everywhere was affected. And I think that's quite unique in itself, don't you reckon?
Definitely, yeah.
And you said before that like it took you about 6 months.
Yeah.
Is there an average? Because like some people might take decades to write a book or whatever, which you have on certain stories. But is there an average time frame that a book could be written in? Or not? That's too much of a general.
Well, it also depends. See, someone could say they wrote a book I've got some that I've written for a couple of years, right? But then it's not as intense as 6 months during lockdown is different. Do you know what I mean? It was like more like a year or so, the equivalent.
Yeah, right.
But I'd say the average is about 6 to 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Now, it's funny, we're talking this as if I don't know the answers to this question, but I think the audience will benefit from these couple of episodes that we're talking about, the feature film that we've almost got out to the world.
Fingers crossed.
Well, fingers crossed, yeah. But it started with this guy, the book. And right next to the book, maybe explain what that is.
Okay, so eventually we made a movie, and I've got to introduce you that this man came along, Simon Carter, and he joined the project not long after. That was December 2020, and I remember the date, December 4th. You came in. So we've got Gil Ben-Moshe as the lead producer.
Yep.
And 3 of us are mates, and we've been the core team, I guess you would say. Even though we had some amazing talent come in, we've seen it through from inception to now. So you are the director of photography, you are the editor, you are the production supervisor, and you are the co-producer. So a massive job. And that involved us, fleshing out this whole story. It evolved into something, I won't say totally different, but just it grew and grew from the book into something else, which I like. I didn't want to be the type of director that is slavishly. I'm a writer-director, but I never want to be just slavishly following what I've written.
Yeah, you're not like locked into it has to remain blah blah blah, because it definitely didn't. Characters were removed, completely new storylines were added.
Yes.
Which I think is great, because you've got to be confident in your work, but you've got to be open to, maybe not open to change, but open to potential improvements.
I think it's a tough one. You've got to let go of your writing, and you've got to put on your director hat as if you didn't write it, because that's the advantage that directors have. I view very much directors are different to writer-directors. The two are different beasts. And the advantage directors have is they can see the weaknesses in the writing easily.
Yeah.
But I also find it great and a good experience for people who want to read the book and then watch the movie is that you get, I won't say 2 different stories, but you can see the differences, and they're both kind of equal in their own way, just different, and then what you asked about the awards. So eventually we got to the film festival circuit. We had a bit of success, and this was one here we won Best Experimental Film at the Titan International Film Festival in Sydney. Yeah.
And you went along to the awards night, got handed that on stage.
Yes.
We can maybe insert, a photo or some clips. But I don't think I may have won a few awards, none that are coming to me, but none that I got invited to on stage, and received an award. And that wasn't planned for. That was, you were unprepared. Like that's a nice little story. So you turn up to the event.
Right.
There was 3 of you. Yep. The 2 other, lead producer, co-producer, and yourself. They put on a spread.
Yes.
And you were under the impressions that we won like a heat. I think they did 4 heats.
I think there was we won a season or something. I think it was 3 seasons in the year, something like that. But there was a bit of anyway, the bottom line is there was a bit of a communication breakdown. And so I'm sitting there, and so I was told that you won't need to you'll get an award, but you won't need to give a speech. So I'm sitting there, and I hear at the back, just like, Anno 2020, and I thought, that's weird. Did I just hear our title? And I heard James Morgan, and I've got nothing prepared.
Yeah.
But I think from memory, I just said, look, I think the way we did this film, we shot 17 cities around the world, but we used a lot of crafty techniques, and some of that involves modern technology. Some of that involves contra deals with people, because the backstory is, for a story this big, we shot the entire film for $6,000 US because we couldn't get investors. So it's basically self-financed by all of us. But there are things in this movie that I just said in the speech that I believe could provide a pathway to some people who can't. When they watch this movie, there's a way that you could go, right, I could do something like that. And for the sort of people that can't it's very tough as a director to get your first movie made. You can get short films made and so on. Maybe you can do a music clip, but a feature is very tough. Yeah. And this provides a pathway where you can show your storytelling. But also what I believe, what excites me about the movie is, as I say, it's equal to, this is a very ambitious story, but I believe it's equal in its own way. And we found a way through, and a lot of that was yours as well, but just the whole team, Gil and so on, all our actors, we found ways that, but some of them involve that technology that we hope will inspire people,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And again, the book was a product of circumstance. You probably had the foresight to do a film adaptation of it.
Yeah.
And product of circumstance, because I think a lot of people that were mid-production on movies, and especially TV, they had to take a pause because of all the lockdowns. Yeah. And I remember early on when we first started talking about how would we do this, I was like, well, as storytellers, we have a responsibility to tell certain stories, whether it's a minority or a topic that isn't well documented. Like the whole film and TV industry was sort of closed down, and that motivated me to go, we have to tell these stories. They're so engaging, and a lot of people, got in trouble for speaking their mind, and it's funny, most of them turned out to be right with their opinions. They share their opinions on maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, and they got suppressed,
censored,
censored,
lost their jobs,
and they ended up some being correct in their thought process.
Some of them did, yeah. So I mean, you're hitting on something there where what was great by not having a financier or a distributor is that
we should.
I sort of figured, well, all right, this is the one time in my career that probably I'll be able to say whatever I want. So therefore, guess what? I'm going to say whatever I want. Just there's going to be no, because we got no, and in a world where I hope when this film's out that people will find that refreshing, because it's a world where the corporatization has taken over so much that everyone's just beholden to something and you can't say, and they're nervous. And we were shooting at a time where it's very sensitive. But again, I'm not I'm against message. I don't like message movies or filmmakers with an agenda.
Yeah, neither.
Again, it's just more, we were giving a voice to everyone. Again, going back to those competing philosophies,
Yeah.
the arguments that we all knew people were having behind the scenes, but that's not being shown. So there's literally, I believe, outside of sort of a self-financed thing, I don't think anytime soon you're going to get something on 2020 that could get out to the public, get past the gatekeepers, that will allow just everyone to have a voice. And then it's up to the public, and none of us know the answers. So it might be even in 10 years that the people could look back and say this story and go, okay, I now agree with that character. But 5 years ago I didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Because, I mean, this censorship, how can you navigate a career in storytelling with such strict censorship? You're like, but okay, so in order for me to succeed in my role, I have to change the way in which I approach my job. I can't talk about this, and I can't talk about this, and I can't talk about this. Oh, but be creative. Okay. How?
That's the operative world. Like, creativity doesn't really thrive in an environment where you're just pigeonholing yourself or restricting yourself from the get-go.
That's true.
Yeah. So that was what was freeing with this, is no one, we just didn't, it was just literally, I think we were all reflecting what we were seeing in the world.
Yeah.
Arguments we had with people, and then that was being brought into this. But I want to be clear also, as I said earlier, I wouldn't really call this exactly a movie on, let me think about how to present this. I wouldn't say it's a movie on COVID or lockdowns or it's the themes.
No.
It's much bigger than that, and it just but it's always in the background. You know
what I mean?
I
think that's important to point out, because a lot of things have usually a singular topic. And as we say, we're not a message movie. But ours, Anno 2020, isn't about lockdowns, about COVID. It's set. That's the year that it's set in, 2020, and it's about people going through their, changed normal lives and navigating relationships, the breakdowns, the start of new ones.
Yeah. Well, I probably should have said that it's a vignette story, so that means that there's multiple stories, and and there is a connectedness between those. But the point is, and there's a bigger story, I would argue, but in the singular stories, a lot of them are nothing or very little to do with specifically 2020. Or I didn't want to tell a story just on that, but I thought it was the perfect way to provide the intensity for, say, we got situations where there's a mother and daughter going, I won't give it away, but some major trauma. Then you've got past wounds, like the two brothers, with it, and then they have to sometimes communicate remotely. There's some of that. Then there's people connecting face to face, or in a limited capacity face to face with masks and so on. But this sort of but it opened up much bigger themes. So this is, to be clear, that most of this is a story we could have told before 2020, but that this present era, what would you say? It increases the intensity.
Yeah, and it was designed around it was utilizing the restrictions that people had in how they could communicate, because they couldn't drive down the road and see their friend. They could make phone calls, they could make video calls or conferencing calls or whatever. Yeah. That was the main way of communicating, and the way that we incorporated that, I think, was great, because it's relevant to the time period. That's how everyone was doing it, communicating, and we were able to tell our story via those means. And I think it's historically accurate is a little bit of a strong term, but I don't know how else to word that. I mean, it is accurate to the way people were communicating at the time, and we just utilise that functionality to assist us in telling an engaging story, I think.
Yeah, and I would also add that we got into a bit of a docudrama space in places. Like, for example, one actor, Andre Doc Williams, happened to be at the Black Lives Matter, what was it now? Black Lives Matter Boulevard when they shut down a boulevard in Washington, D.C. And whatever we think of that event, the bottom line is it's a big historical event. So he was there in the moment. So
that's right.
And now Hollywood or someone could go back and recreate that. They could have $100 million budget. But this sort of we captured the realism of that, of a guy undercover. There it is.
Yeah, that's right.
So also there was things where the actors became storytellers too, because I think they were living. This is the key thing: is we were shooting, like you mentioned, an historical piece, but we were shooting it in the time. In the thing we're exploring. See, 2020.
That's right.
And we were doing early 2021 as well.
Yeah.
But the point is the world didn't change in that time. It was really like a continuation of 2020.
Yeah, that's right.
So these actors were going through things and that was getting reflected into the story as well.
Yes.
And then where it grew beyond the book in many places is then we started to find out there, and this is something I've always wanted to do, actors started to open up to us, and I think this was because, if you recall, during lockdowns, I think people had more time to talk about what they were going through. So we were having private conversations with them after shoots and all that.
That's right.
And we started to learn about their stories, and then we said, hey, would you be brave enough to put that, dramatize that real event in your life? So things can, the cast is incredible in this. And
yeah, they really are.
They're brave as well to tackle things. And I had to check, are you cool? Because this could get psychologically dangerous. You're going to be covering things that are the darkest things in your life, or happy things that since then your relationship has gone bad. So it could, you know what I mean? So in many ways, the book was a launching point, and it's its own thing, and I'm very proud of that. And then the movie is maybe 50% the same as that, and 50% it just took on.
Available on Amazon. We should throw that in there.
Yes, primarily it is in bookstores and libraries around the world too, but on Amazon is the main place.
Nice.
Yep. And audiobook, paperback, hardback, ebook.
Nice. Go out, get a copy.